Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're in the bubble, as I've said. Welcome to Drux Milan Unboxing. And when I'm in the bubble, I make use of a captured audience. And across from me is a real legend of South African boxing. When we talk about the greatest fighters that South Africa's ever produced, for all timers, we'll bring up Victor Wheel. When you talk about longevity and consistency, there's really only two main names. That's Vuyani Bungu, often mentioned, and most people consider Brian Mitchell, sitting across from me here, as the best South African fighter that ever was. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Drux. Well, take it as a compliment. Thank you. Yeah, they sometimes compare me to Victor Wheel and Vuyani Bungu, but I think being the only South African in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, I think I've proved that I have the record, and I suppose, yeah.
You are, along with Stan Christodoulou, of course, who's an official. That's something else.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to go from the beginning. Take us back to when you started boxing. What got you into boxing?
Yes, my career started very young for me. My mom and dad divorced when I was 5 years old. My dad was South African bantamweight champion professional in 1962 when I was a year old. So when I got to 9, I said to my mom, even though my dad wasn't in the house, I want to fight. And she didn't want her only little boy, I'm an only child, to fight. But she knew that's what I wanted to do. It was in my genes. My whole family was boxers. And my dad being a champion, I wanted to fight. So my mom took me to the Ellis Park Boxing Club, the famous Ellis Park where we won the World Rugby Cup. Just down the road was the Ellis Park Boxing Stadium and Boxing Club, it is. And that's where I started as a 9-year-old kid. And then we moved to Malvern, and I spent 10 years as an amateur at Malvern, at 110 amateur fights.
That's a lot of amateur fights in today's world. A lot of the kids now, we've had now Akani and Ricardo who had a bit of an amateur career, but you get other guys that have no amateur career like Lorena and others that typically nowadays when I interview people, if they had more than 10 fights, it's actually a lot now. Most of them have 2 or 3 and end up in the pros. Do you think it's important to have that in amateur career?
I think so, you know. Kevin Arena is just a different example. I mean, he's a great kid, he's so dedicated and disciplined. And he's made it to an IBO world champion without having an amateur career, as you said. But I think you do need that background. You need to be groomed. You need to learn from a young age. You look at a professional golfer, a Tiger Woods, anybody. These guys were hitting the ball when they were 5 years old. So I think you do need a background, but then there is the odd example of a Kevin Arena that makes it without the background. But my amateur career definitely helped me.
When you started pro, I was chatting to Harold that trained you there towards the end of your career the other day. You actually started as a junior welterweight. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I was a junior welterweight as an amateur actually.
Yes.
But when I turned pro with Willie Will, he said to me, "No, you can't fight junior welter. You're too small for junior welter." And Willie was right. But the difference was now I was training every day, 2-3 hours a day as a pro, and the weight started coming down. And then I wasn't sure if I was going to fight lightweight or junior light. And you got to try and get to the lowest weight you can as a professional boxer. Otherwise, you're fighting bigger guys. Everybody's pulling weight to get to a certain weight.
Yes.
So I realized as a professional boxer, junior lightweight was the right division for me. I trained for 3-4 hours a day every day, and I pulled weight and I dieted, and I made junior lightweight. And that was my weight for my whole career.
But as you weight, you became SA champion. Beat some fighters that went on in their own right to become good fighters, like Nika Kumalo, just at the top of my head, some guy I know there from Cape Town.
Kumalo knocked that in 3 rounds.
Yes, and Nika went on to challenge for a world title twice and was quite a good fighter in the end. But then you eventually got the chance to fight for the world title, and that was against Alfredo Lane at Sun City.
Yeah.
Now Alfredo Lane didn't go down as a great champion in the end, but he beat Wilfredo Gomez. Puerto Rican was a great champion, so he actually had the lineal title.
Yes.
The man who beat the man who beat the man.
Exactly.
Tell me about it going into that Alfredo Lane fight, when the fight was sound and you knew you were going to fight Alfredo Lane. How did you think about it? Did you think, ooh, maybe this is tough, or no, I know I can do this?
No, it was amazing. I mean, I defended my South African title 9 times, and Carlos Giacomo was my manager and trainer, and he came to me and said, between him and Stan Christodoulou, they can get me a world title fight at Sun City against Alfredo Lane. So I didn't care who it was. I didn't know who Alfredo Lane was. I then studied him, and I saw that he beat the great Wilfredo Gomez. And so they said Lane wasn't great, but like you said, Lane had beaten a great, and he'd knocked out Gomez.
So he could hit.
So he could punch. I mean, he wasn't world champion for nothing. He had knocked out a great world champion. And I had to beat him, and the media thought I couldn't beat him. The South African media said, Mitchell's a good South African champion, but this might be a notch too much for him to win a WBA title. The international media were 50-50 about me.
Yes.
And I said, there's no way I'm getting out of that ring on the 27th of September 1986 without that WBA belt. I'm going to win a world title.
You can understand the skepticism to an extent, because a lot of South Africans fought for titles and then sometimes they do a good account and sometimes they just get blown away. Talk to us about the actual fight there you're taking on Alfredo Lane.
Yeah, the fight was amazing. I trained harder than I've ever trained in my life before. It was now a 15-round fight, scheduled 15 round those days. And I just put in the work. I was 25 years old. I was getting the greatest opportunity of my life. You know, every guy that puts on a boxing glove wants to be a world champion, wants to get a shot at a world title. And I wasn't only getting a shot at a world title, it was the WBA world title. It was the biggest in the world. You had the WBA and you had the WBC, and the IBF kind of came along as third then. But WBA was it. If you won a WBA title, you were the king of the world. And yeah, I was excited and I was keen to fight. And the rest is history. I knocked out Alfredo Lane in the 10th round, knocked him down 3 times on that 27th of September 1986. It's still quite funny. I don't even know how the fight was sanctioned, because Saul Kersner organised the fight those years in Sun City. We were in the height of apartheid, so we weren't competing. Zola Budd and myself were actually the only 2 sportsmen that were competing internationally. We never had anything happening. It was because of sanctions and apartheid, obviously. There was no sportsman competing. Saul Kersner, he did it, but he got this world title.
They used that Botswana homeland excuse, I think, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Whatever trick
that
pulled,
worked,
it worked. I was happy to get a world title fight. And I knocked the champion out and became South Africa's only world champion. And I carried the flag for South Africa for many years. The unfortunate thing was I was never able to defend my title in my own country. And I still live in South Africa. I had many opportunities to emigrate. And I had to be on the road as the road warrior, 13 world title fights out the country.
That's the next thing I get to, because right after that, South Africa was basically kicked out of the WBA. And it was touch and go whether they were going to strip you, even that was on the table. But eventually they let you keep the title, but you couldn't defend the world title in South Africa anymore. So you then became the ultimate road warrior. That's what they used to call it.
The
It's
media,
unique sort of thing in boxing.
The ultimate road warrior. And geez, I went to Puerto Rico, I went to Panama, I went to France, I went to Italy 5 times, I went to Spain, I went to London with all those demonstrators that hated South Africans for some reason. And yeah, then I went to my happy hunting ground to fight Tony Lopez in America.
In the end.
Lopez and his mother.
Nowadays, you see fighters want to stay at home. They try and get a big American name to travel. You can't do it. It's only when
Tony Lopez never travelled. He hated it.
He actually
stayed in Sacramento.
He didn't want to travel out of Sacramento. Never mind another country.
Yeah, he didn't want to.
He did in the end. He did come to South Africa
after he was kind of at the end of his career. But it was a tough road. It was very tough fighting every opponent in his backyard. You know, obviously everybody was against me. The referees, the judges, the crowd. And I had to just step up the game and do that extra work to win.
Just before the Lopez fight, there's mentioning that you defended your WBA world title successfully 11 times, right before the Lopez fight. That set the record, because the world record was held by a guy called Todd Morgan, way back when the division didn't have that sort of glamour. So you broke that record. You had 11 successful title defenses. Title defense number 12 was Tony Lopez, a unification fight for the IBF title. You sort of thought you're going to retire. And then the call came to fight Lopez.
Yeah, I actually did retire. I was actually in Cape Town, in your part of the world, and I was on holiday with my family, and I done everything I needed to do in boxing as far as I was concerned. I had 11 defences that equaled Todd Morgan's record, and I got a call from promoter Rodney Berman and Cedric Kushner, and they said, no, you can't retire yet. We've got you a unification fight. You've worked your whole life to get a big fight like this. And I said, no, man, I've decided to retire. I was having a beer for the first time. I never drank alcohol just about my whole life. So I was having a beer on the beach in Cape Town and thinking, hey, life's lucky, I'm finished. And then I thought, geez, a unification with Tony Lopez would be wonderful. So I put the beer down, I got back in the gym, phoned Adam Forbrack, and then I went to Sacramento to fight Tony Lopez for that. We both put our titles on the line, the WBA and the IBF. And I got a draw in Sacramento. I mean, obviously getting a draw in Sacramento, you've won. And the whole of South Africa fortunately saw the fight. Everyone had decoders, If you didn't have a decoder, you couldn't see Mixer and
Well,
Lopez.
everybody had to VHS tape it for you,
Yeah,
watch
so
the big games.
well,
Everybody
I-
had your friends and want to watch.
You either had friends with a decoder or you bought a decoder.
Yeah.
So it was great times for me. Mnet loved me. They were throwing the promoters with money because I was selling so many decoders. And yeah, I got the draw with Tony Lopez, and that was my last world title fight that I wanted to compete in. And it was, as you said, my 12th defense. I broke the all-time record, which I still hold in the WBA. But the draw just,
What was the game plan going into the Lopez fight?
the draw didn't complete the picture for me. It didn't complete my career. So Rodney Bergman said to me, "We've got to do it one more time. We've got to go." So I said, "Okay, that's great. Let's fight Lopez again, but let's fight him in South Africa now, because now
Yes.
the doors are opening. He could come here." And Rodney said, "No,
Fair chance of that.
Rodney said, "No, it's not going to happen. The money's in America. We've got to go back to Sacramento." And I thought, yes, back to Sacramento 6 months later. But I thought, okay, put it all on the line. Last world title fight. This is now really, really going to be my last world title fight. 14th world title. I'm going to put it all on the line. I'm going to train as hard as I've ever trained. And I went and fortunately I outsmarted Tony Lopez.
It was one of your easier fights, actually. The second time was much easier.
Yeah,
You completely outboxed him.
Yeah, I made it easy for myself, if I have to give myself a compliment, because I outsmarted him. The first fight, I went toe to toe with him. Kind of similar to Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, the first fight. The great Sugar Ray Leonard lost. I mean, that shouldn't happen. But the second fight, obviously, the great Sugar Ray Leonard showed you who he was.
Yeah.
And similar to that fight, it was Lopez. I went toe to toe with a Mexican fighter. He's a great body puncher. And it was the wrong fight. It made it a close fight. It could have been a draw. I thought I won, but it was a draw.
If we watch your first fight again and again, it is a legit close fight.
Close.
It's very hard to be objective. We all thought you won, but we South Africans, if we watch it, it was a close fight. But in the end, the sad thing was you were robbed of a record of becoming the first South African to win a unified title in that thing. So you should actually have won that, and you should actually have had 13 successful title defenses consecutively, like Bungu. But you know, you had to give up your WBA title in order to fight Lopez again for a rematch. Otherwise, you had to fight the match in between. And,
yeah, it was a choice I had to take. I didn't want to fight anymore, so I thought, let me give up the WBA title and go for the big fight, the Lopez fight. And I didn't go there for a payday, and that was my biggest payday ever. It was a huge payday, but I went there to win.
Yeah, Lopez, if we look at Lopez, he still had a good career after that. You know, when he became a lightweight champion, knocking out Joey Camacho, lost that to Dingaan eventually, and even competed quite well against Julio Cesar Chavez, way to tail.
As a junior welter.
As a junior welter. So he was a strong guy, and he could hit. And he beat some good fighters. He beat John Molina on the third fight.
He beat Jorge Paez,
he beat
Rocky
Lockridge.
Lockridge. He beat great names.
You were actually going to fight Rocky Lockridge in a non-title fight.
I was supposed to fight him at Sun City, correct? Your boxing knowledge is good, I must say, Drix. I was supposed to fight him in a non-title fight for R1 million at Sun City in about 1988, which R1 million was huge then. And Rocky Lockridge didn't sign the contract, so we fought somebody else and we just carried on.
We've got Saturday, we've got Kevin Reina headlining. He's fighting a chap called Patrick Ferguson, who on paper he should easily beat.
Yes.
But you know, on paper, the fights on fought where you had seen some tremendous upsets, like Lomo against Dongeni or Avena. Fighters will always tell you every fight is the same, I'm 100% for it. But to be honest, can you ever mentally be 100% for everything? You know, if we look at your career, you fought guys, sometimes we had some non-title fights here in SA.
Yes.
Right, and then you have those great performances against Lopez. I think Jackie Beard, the second fight, also a very good performance. Jim McDonald, Joe Rivera, the second fight. And then you have a guy like, say, Felipe Orozco that you fought. And that's a fight that's very awkward.
Yeah, he was a spoiler.
Do you think it's styles, or do you think it's just mentally very hard to get yourself there?
Both. But Felipe Orozco was a difficult opponent. He gave Dingaan Tabela a hard fight.
Yes,
he was actually beating Tabela. It wasn't the right opponent for me, for them to bring out for my fighting a non-title fight in my home country. They should have brought out a guy like Lopez, a fighter who I look good against. I like the guy that came.
You like the guys that come forward.
Roscoe was slick in it. Yeah, I didn't like a guy that was too slick. And I was just looking for him the whole night, Roscoe. And it made me look quite bad because he was a spoiler. But although I won the fight, both ways, you know, you don't really get up for non-title fights either. It needs to be a big world title fight. So in answering your question with Kevin Lerena, I hope he looks good for Golden Gloves, and for Kevin. He's a good guy, he's a friend of mine. But you do take your foot off the pedal a bit when it's a non-title fight, and he's a non-title catchweight fight. So we just hope Kevin looks good against Patrick Ferguson.
You went into training. You don't train boxers any longer. You manage now.
Yes.
But you trained the world champion in Harry Simon. I'm correct, eh?
Namibia's first world champion.
Namibia's first world champion, Harry Simon, and in retrospect, that victory looks so much better now because he beat Winky Wright. And Winky Wright is in the Hall of Fame along with you. Eh?
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic win for us. Well, you got to remember, Winky Wright was rated #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world at the time. So no one expected Harry Simon
later in his career,
Yeah, later.
He was in the pound-for-pound.
Well,
Yeah, but later in his career,
he became pound-for-pound.
Shane Mosley and those guys.
Correct, yeah. So he became pound-for-pound the best in the world. So we were fighting a legend, actually. And Harry Simon wasn't supposed to win.
Yes.
And actually, I don't know if you know the story, what happened after.
Yes, they announced it as a draw.
Yeah.
Or no, they announced it at
they announced it.
And then they messed up the cards, and then they came back and then actually
the female American judge said to the supervisor called the scorecard around. She'd given the fight to Harry Simon.
Yes.
They called us back out of the dressing room. How amazing is this to win a world title? To get back in the ring and tell us you're the WBO world champion. Yeah. So that was one of the fighters I trained. I trained Cassius Beloy. We had a few world titles.
Yes, you had that big rivalry with Nick Durant when he was fighting Philip Ngo.
Yes. That was kind of a payday for Beloy because we'd moved up to lightweight, and that was a nice payday for him. Indu was a bit bigger than him, but it was a good fight, and it was a nice fight, and Nick and myself were
we were
opposition.
We were better show than the fighters in the
pre-fight. We were respectful of each other's trainers, but we were big opposition. And it was a good fight, Cassius Beloy and Philip Indu. And then I had Martin Jacobs win an SA title.
And then I think he beat him back with Ayile, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I suppose I did pretty well as a trainer, but it wasn't my whole mission in life because I'd spent 25 years competing as a fighter, 15 years amateur, 10 years amateur at least, and 15 years pro, and then 10 years as a trainer. So I'd spent 35 years in a boxing gym.
Yes.
So I actually wanted to be on the business side.
So you went to management rather.
And commentating.
And you know well.
And spokesperson for Golden Gloves, as you know.
Yes. And you're well known for commentating, but I've done it a little bit as well. So at least not nearly as much as you had years of catch up to do. But at least I know it's not as easy as it looks, because people give you a lot of criticism, but you're listening to the truck here in your ears in the meantime, and it's very hard because you have to be critical, you have to be objective, but we're all boxing fans also at heart, even if you're an ex-fighter or have rights like me, and we all have our preferences, and you can't be too critical, which I think must be very hard for you, because you must surely sit there sometimes, because we see some great fights on Super Sports, and inevitably you also see the bad apples, and you must think, geez, look at these Pelucas, I must make a comeback.
And you can't realistically call them Pelucas, because you also got to keep the boxing at its highest level, because it is a great sport, and it is the sport that we're commentating.
So respect to anybody who gets into it.
Respect to anybody who gets into boxing. But it is tough to call a fight against two guys that are really average. What do you say? And you've got to keep the momentum going. And boxing commentary, as you know, as a commentator as well, I mean, it's long. I mean,
it's a long night.
I've been to East London and commentated for 6-7 hours a day.
Yes.
A rugby match or a soccer match or whatever is like 80 minutes, 90 minutes. It's tough to commentate rugby or soccer. I'm not saying it's easy. But boxing, we're doing it for 5 hours.
Yes.
Flat out.
You go through the whole card.
So it's not easy to be a boxing commentator. It looks easier than what it is. And then obviously, like you say, and then we get criticised. The fans of the one fighter, if you say something about them, are going to knock you. And the fans of the other fighter are going to knock you. I just try and be as unbiased as possible and call the fight as it is. A lot of people don't like what I say. A lot of people do like what I say. But I've got to call what I see.
Yes. Touching on another issue before we call it a night, I know you're in a hurry to take a rest, you're busy also with your fighter, managing Ricardo Malajika here. For weight issue,
yes.
I think it's fair to say that you had your fair battle of the scale. It wasn't an easy cut for you, but you made it always, right? Can't recall you ever having been overweight for any time fight.
I never got on the scale.
Nowadays, you see the trend, especially with the big stars, where they just don't make the weight. Luis Nerio is guilty of that. I think Canelo also once or twice.
Yeah.
You can go on. And they say, I can't do no more. Do what you want. They can't cancel the show mostly, and then they have to do a catch weight. And I think Bumlani Msevi, I was watching you guys in Punchline in Supersport, and he was asking you, Brian, what's the secret? And you gave him a free word answer, and I was sitting at home watching him, and I really had to laugh. But can you remember what you told him?
Tell
You
me,
said, close your mouth. Really?
Yeah.
But that's now very simple, but can you
my
tell
partner
us?
Charlene always says to me that,
Close your mouth.
can't you find another line? But it is the truth if you think about it. Even me,
Yeah, it's funny, but
I've
it's
picked
true.
up weights since boxing. Well, people say to me, what's the best diet? And I say, well, you've got to close this.
Yeah, no, Harold, there's also some interesting stories to tell about the weight cut, how he found you by the vending machine and
That's
things
stuff.
like that.
I had big weight problems. I was a big junior lightweight, and I couldn't get an opportunity to move up in weight. Because those years, the lightweight champions and the junior welterweight champions wouldn't have given me a shot.
Because you're going to be banned if you lose your title.
Yeah,
That's
and so I couldn't give up the junior lightweight title, and I struggled to make the weight. But you got to do it, and you got to be professional. Man. To answer what you're saying about the guys that don't make the weight, it's unprofessional. You got to make the weight. You got to sign a contract, and you got to do what you got to do to make the weight.
How would you evaluate a fighter? Where would you draw the line and say, okay, this is enough now, we can't make it with weight, we've got to move up now?
Well, I was saying to Ricardo Malajika earlier on, he's 22 years old, he's a junior bantamweight, and he's tall, he's taller than I am, not that I'm tall, but he's taller than I am for a junior bantamweight. And I said to him, we're going to just see how your body goes, because he walks around 57 kilos and he fights obviously 52. When he starts walking around at 60 kilos, then we move up to bantamweight. So you monitor a fighter's body, because a 22-year-old in boxing is fully grown man, but in boxing you're not fully grown.
Your body also,
No, by the time you're 25, all the hard training in boxing, you get muscles, and you go up 1 or 2 weight divisions. So you gotta just analyze where your fighter is, what weight he's walking around at, and obviously he's got to be eating and dieting right, and training right. But you gotta be a professional. You gotta make the weight. That's what it's all about.
Last issue, and then we're done for one night. It's a big weekend of boxing. We have Chris van Heerden taking on Jaron Ennis in America. He's up against it as well. Good luck to him. Then we have Saul Canelo Alvarez, the one other guy besides Anthony Joshua that can put 70,000 people in the stadium if we didn't have COVID. And he's taking on the Ring Magazine and the WBA World Champion at super middle, Callum Smith, much bigger, taller guy. How do you see that fight going?
It's hard to pick anybody beating Canelo Alvarez, because Canelo Alvarez is a smart guy.
He's improved,
he's just improved so much. I mean, Gennady Golovkin is one of my current heroes, boxing heroes, and I'm a big fan of Gennady's. I've commentated quite a lot of his fights in Monte Carlo and around the world. And the first fight I thought Gennady Golovkin won against Canelo Alvarez. And the second fight, sadly, I thought Alvarez won.
I thought Alvarez edged the second
the second fight.
So
that's how good Alvarez is. To beat Golovkin, I mean, you've got to be flipping good to beat Golovkin.
Yeah.
And Alvarez beats anybody. I mean, I think maybe he might have even given Mayweather a better run for his money nowadays, because he was very young when he fought Mayweather.
He was still a little bit raw, even though
he was very young, and that's his only loss.
Yes.
So to answer your question, nobody beats Alvarez today in boxing.
You think he can stop Callum Smith?
I think he can stop anybody.
Tall body, lots of real
estate. I think Chris van Heerden's going to have his work cut out.
Yeah, I think Chris, kudos to him. You know, I like the fact that he had the good spot to go up in America, sort of like Frans Botha did, and make a career for himself. And he's done quite well. He's won a lot of fights. He was thrown in against Errol Spence. Errol was supposed to be the next big thing. Now he is the big thing. And the same with Jaron Ennis. So we'll have to see.
Well, we wish Chris van Heerden all the best. I mean, he's South African and we're backing him. But they have thrown him in the deep end against the youngsters. 26 fights, 26 wins, and 24 by knockout. If Chris beats Ennis, then Chris is made in America. That's his dream. Then he's fighting for $2 million purses. So good luck to Chris van Heerden on Saturday. And I say Canelo Alvarez will win.
Okay, Brian, good luck to yourself behind the microphone. Good luck to your fighter, Ricardo Malajika, as well. Always great talking to you, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. And thank you for being such a good host.
Thanks, Brian.
Drux Malan, you're doing a good job out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.